Imagine walking into a crowded room where conversations are already flowing, laughter fills the air, and people seem drawn to one another as if by some invisible magnet. Now picture yourself standing quietly in the corner, wanting to connect, but unsure how to step in without sounding forced or being overlooked. Almost everyone has lived that moment. The desire to be noticed, respected, and remembered, colliding with the fear of being ignored or dismissed. This tension, small but sharp, reveals something we all secretly crave: influence. Not influence in the sense of manipulation or control, but the kind that makes others want to listen when you speak, trust you when you propose an idea, and welcome you into their lives because of how you make them feel. It is the difference between being a face in the background and being the person others turn to with interest and warmth. Dale Carnegie understood this hunger long before it was common to admit it out loud. He saw that success in life rarely comes from intelligence or technical skill alone. Instead, it depends on how well we navigate human relationships, the subtle art of being liked, respected, and persuasive without creating friction. Carnegie believed this skill was not reserved for the naturally charming or charismatic few. It could be learned, practiced, and sharpened until it transformed not only how others saw you, but how you saw yourself. Imagine changing the trajectory of your career, your friendships, or even your family life by adjusting how you speak, listen, and respond. That is the promise hidden in his work, and it is why his book has endured for generations. This is a summary of How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, an independent summary created for educational purposes. If this summary resonates with you, I encourage you to purchase the full book and explore it in greater depth. At its heart, the book is about mastering relationships without manipulation. It shows how to turn hostility into cooperation, indifference into enthusiasm, and casual encounters into meaningful connections. Carnegie distills human behavior into practical techniques, handling people without arousing resentment, becoming genuinely liked, persuading others without argument, and inspiring lasting change without offense. These principles are illustrated through real examples, from presidents and business leaders to everyday interactions, and they all share one theme. People respond not to logic or force, but to how you make them feel about themselves. The journey begins with a simple but often ignored truth. Criticism, no matter how justified it feels, rarely improves behavior. Instead, it breeds resentment. Carnegie makes this point vivid by recalling notorious figures who, despite their crimes, never saw themselves as guilty. Even the most hardened criminals rationalize their actions, convinced they are misunderstood or unfairly treated. If those living at society's edges cling to self-justification, then the rest of us, ordinary workers, parents, friends, do the same. Pointing out someone's flaws may relieve our frustration, but it usually hardens the other person's resistance. In place of criticism, Carnegie urges the practice of empathy and encouragement. He shares the story of a safety manager who shifted from scolding workers about safety helmets to asking whether the gear was uncomfortable. By framing his concern around their well-being, he saw cooperation increase without hostility. This approach echoes one of the book's deepest themes. People crave appreciation more than correction. A compliment can inspire change faster than condemnation ever could. The great leaders of history knew this instinctively. Abraham Lincoln, after learning hard lessons early in life about the pain of ridicule, avoided direct criticism whenever possible. Even when generals disobeyed his orders and squandered chances to end the Civil War sooner, Lincoln chose restraint. He drafted harsh letters but left them unsent, recognizing that his words might wound pride without improving performance. That self-control, Carnegie suggests, is what made Lincoln not only admired but deeply effective in handling people. From here, the book expands into practical strategies for making others feel valued. Something as simple as remembering a person's name, showing genuine interest in their passions, or listening more than speaking can transform interactions. Carnegie reminds us that a smile is more powerful than a lecture, that curiosity builds bridges where arguments create walls. If these ideas sound obvious, it is only because they mirror truths we have all felt but often neglect in practice. How often do we rush to talk about ourselves instead of asking about others? How quickly do we jump to correct mistakes instead of acknowledging what was done well? These small shifts in behavior, repeated consistently, build the foundation for trust and goodwill. Carnegie also reveals a paradox about influence. The best way to win people to your side is not to push harder, but to step back and let them feel ownership of the idea. He urges us to invite others to contribute, to let them save face when they are wrong, and even to share our own mistakes before pointing out theirs. These gestures of humility not only soften resistance, but make cooperation feel natural rather than forced. Influence, in this sense, is not about domination. It is about creating an atmosphere where people want to follow your lead because they feel respected, not coerced. What emerges from these insights is a portrait of human beings as deeply emotional creatures, driven less by reason than by pride, desire, and fear of rejection. To win friends and influence people is not to outwit them with clever arguments, but to honor these needs while guiding them gently toward cooperation. Carnegie does not promise tricks or shortcuts. He promises a philosophy of interaction that, when practiced sincerely, reshapes the way others respond to you and the way you see the world. Carnegie often illustrates his lessons through vivid stories, because human behavior is easier to grasp when we see it in action rather than as abstract rules. He tells of business leaders who transformed stubborn employees into loyal allies simply by shifting from commands to encouragement. He highlights ordinary men and women who found that asking questions instead of issuing orders changed the mood of a conversation entirely. These examples remind us that influence is not built through dominance, but through the subtle gift of letting others feel important. One of the strongest themes is the power of sincere interest. When you take time to ask someone about their life, their struggles, or their dreams, you give them a gift rarer than money. People are hungry to be heard. They want to feel that what they say matters. This explains why a good listener is often remembered more fondly than the most eloquent speaker. Carnegie suggests that instead of planning your next statement while someone is talking, you lean fully into their words. Let your curiosity guide you. Nod, smile, ask a thoughtful question. These small signals tell the other person that their story has value. Over time, this builds a reputation that cannot be bought, the reputation of someone who genuinely cares. Closely tied to this is the magic of names. A name, Carnegie says, is the sweetest sound in any language to the person who owns it. Forgetting a name makes others feel like an afterthought. Remembering it and using it warmly makes them feel recognized as an individual rather than a face in the crowd. The effort is small, but the impact is great. Consider the difference between being greeted with a generic hello and hearing your name spoken with warmth. One is polite, the other is personal. That small distinction can change how someone feels about you for years. Another insight is the way enthusiasm spreads. If you want others to be interested in what you say, you must first show genuine excitement yourself. Carnegie points out that energy in conversation is contagious. People may forget your exact words, but they will remember the spark in your tone, the light in your eyes, the sense that you care deeply about what you were saying. Just as boredom deadens a room, passion awakens it. When you speak with enthusiasm, you invite others into your world, and they cannot help but respond. Beyond making people like you, the book dives into how to bring them around to your perspective without conflict. Carnegie insists that arguments rarely produce real winners. Even if you prove your point, you often lose goodwill in the process. The smarter strategy is to avoid confrontation altogether. Begin by acknowledging where the other person is right. Agree with them on as much as you honestly can. This softens resistance and opens space for dialogue. If you must correct, do it gently, framing your view as an addition rather than an attack. He tells of how Socrates, centuries earlier, won arguments not by clashing head-on, but by asking questions that led others to his conclusion. When people arrived at the answer themselves, they embraced it as their own. The same principle applies when admitting mistakes. Defensiveness only fuels tension, but swift honesty diffuses it. If you are wrong, Carnegie argues, admit it quickly and with enthusiasm. This disarms critics and often turns potential enemies into allies. It is surprisingly hard for someone to continue attacking you once you have already accepted fault. Far from lowering respect, this candor elevates it because it demonstrates courage and fairness. Emotional framing is another tool. If you want someone to adopt your idea, begin with kindness. Carnegie calls this a drop of honey. A gentle word at the start of a conversation can change the entire course of what follows. Instead of issuing a demand, make a request. Instead of pointing out failure, acknowledge effort. Instead of pushing, invite. People resist force, but they respond to warmth. The same lesson can be seen in business negotiations, family discussions, even in politics. Those who win people over are rarely the loudest in the room. They are the ones who make others feel comfortable enough to agree. When dealing with complaints, Carnegie recommends patience above all. Let the other person air their frustrations fully. Do not interrupt. Do not rush to defend yourself. The act of listening alone often cools tempers. Only after they feel heard should you explain your side. At that point, solutions are easier to accept because the emotional pressure has already been released. The key is not to silence conflict, but to give it space to burn out before guiding it toward resolution. Another way to win cooperation is by asking questions rather than giving orders. A manager who says, "Could we look at this approach?" invites collaboration. A parent who asks, "What do you think would work better?" encourages responsibility. In both cases, the person feels ownership over the solution, which makes them more willing to follow through. Influence grows strongest when people believe they are acting out of choice, not compliance. Carnegie also stresses that people respond powerfully to recognition. Almost everyone longs to feel significant, yet most go through their days unnoticed. Offering genuine appreciation for effort or skill is like giving water to a thirsty plant. It makes people flourish. But there's an important distinction between flattery and praise. Flattery is shallow and insincere. It may work briefly, but it eventually breeds suspicion. Real praise, on the other hand, comes from noticing specific qualities and acknowledging them with sincerity. That kind of recognition inspires loyalty and creates bonds that endure. Even in persuasion, stories and vivid imagery matter more than cold facts. Carnegie notes how films, newspapers, and advertising appeal to emotions and imagination. If you want someone to care about your message, do not just present numbers or logic. Paint a picture of what success will feel like. Show how their life improves if they act. People are moved by what they can see, hear, and feel in their mind, not just by abstract data. Influence is strongest when it awakens the senses as well as the intellect. By weaving these principles together, the book creates a vision of communication that is less about control and more about connection. It teaches that lasting influence comes not from winning battles of logic, but from winning hearts through respect, warmth, and genuine interest. Perhaps the most delicate part of influence lies in helping people change without making them feel attacked. Carnegie points out that almost no one reacts well to blunt correction. Pride and self-image are fragile, and when they are threatened resistance grows. The skill lies in guiding others toward improvement while letting them preserve dignity. One method is to begin with praise. If you must point out a fault, frame it between two sincere compliments. The person hears encouragement first, correction next, and then another note of confidence. Instead of walking away defensive, they walk away motivated. Another tactic is to admit your own mistakes before mentioning someone else's. This shows humility and makes you relatable. Rather than standing above them, you place yourself beside them. You make it clear that error is human and growth is possible. This lowers barriers and opens space for real dialogue. Carnegie demonstrates this with examples of leaders who spoke openly about their failures, which gave them credibility when they encouraged others to do better. Equally powerful is allowing people to save face. Public humiliation might feel like justice in the heat of the moment, but it breeds long-term resentment. A leader who preserves another's dignity, even while correcting them, earns respect. The principle is simple. Never corner someone so completely that their only escape is anger. Always leave a door open to self-respect. Carnegie also notes the value of giving others a good reputation to live up to. If you want someone to rise, describe them as already capable of what you hope they will become. Tell an employee that they are known for being precise and reliable, and they will often work harder to prove it true. Tell a child they are considerate, and they will strive to act with kindness. By casting people in a positive light, you create an identity they naturally want to inhabit. Encouragement is not just about avoiding negativity. It is about instilling belief. Making faults seem easy to correct can transform despair into action. If a task feels overwhelming, people retreat. But if you break it into manageable steps, they move forward with confidence. Even a small victory builds momentum. By keeping challenges within reach, you create an environment where growth feels achievable rather than punishing. Finally, Carnegie teaches the importance of making people glad to do what you want. This does not mean manipulation. It means aligning their interests with yours, showing them how cooperation benefits both sides. When a request is framed as an opportunity rather than a burden, enthusiasm replaces reluctance. A leader who inspires eagerness rather than obedience builds a team that works with energy and loyalty. All of these ideas point toward a deeper truth. Relationships thrive when people feel valued, respected, and inspired. Influence is not about bending others to your will, but about creating conditions where goodwill flows naturally. Whether in business, family, or friendships, the same laws apply. Criticism hardens, appreciation softens. Demands repel, invitations attract. Isolation weakens, but genuine connection strengthens. Carnegie's book endures because it does not offer tricks, but timeless principles rooted in human nature. His message is ultimately one of optimism. People are not immovable. They respond to kindness, patience, and understanding. Even the most difficult relationships can be reshaped when approached with sincerity. And in practicing these skills, we do not only change others, we change ourselves. We become more patient, more empathetic, more capable of drawing out the best in those around us. That transformation is the real victory. Here are 5 practical takeaways from book. 1. Criticism breeds resistance, while sincere appreciation builds cooperation. 2. Listening with genuine interest makes people feel valued and creates lasting bonds. 3. Admitting your own mistakes disarms defensiveness and strengthens credibility. 4. Giving people a positive reputation to live up to inspires them to improve. 5. Influence is strongest when others feel that your ideas are their own. You've listened to a summary of How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, created independently for educational purposes. If it resonated with you, consider buying the full book to explore it in greater detail. You have reached the end. Finishing means you have invested in yourself, and that choice alone sets you apart. Today, try one simple action. Greet someone by name and take a genuine interest in their answer when you ask how they are. Small steps like this carry the power to reshape every connection you make.